Okay, so we're at 8:25. How are we doing with numbers, Jamie? Are we comfortable then?
We're up to 19, so that's quite similar to what we were at 20 now before we had the outage.
Okay, so why don't we get started again? Let me just make sure we're all set.
23 now.
Okay, yeah, so we're coming back to where we were before.
Mhm.
All right. Again, thank you, everyone. We had some technical difficulties, not on LCUSD's part, but it seems like on YouTube's part. We've transitioned to Facebook, have gotten communication out on Facebook, including community members, getting the information out as to where the meeting has transitioned to. And we've gotten a letter out or an email to all families, letting them know as well, and posted it on our website. So hopefully you're joining us back, and we'll continue to see members, community members logging on. Wendy, shall we just pass it on to you? We'll continue. Just a brief, I was recommending we pick up where we left off, but maybe people started dropping off earlier, so we can go through quickly the first few slides that you recommended and then move on to the continued.
All right, thank you so much. So this is just the prelude or the introduction to the governing board's recommended adoption of the background objectives, guiding principles, commitment statement, and DEI definitions. So what I wanted to do is just take people through a brief chronology. And the purpose here is to highlight the responsiveness that I feel has been demonstrated by the governing board in response to community concerns and the articulation of emphasis for directionality with regard to this issue. So back in August, the DEI in Strengths and Needs Assessment was presented. I'll be quick. I'm not going to go into the great level of detail until we catch up with the slides where we dropped off. But I think it's important to note that that report was presented by our consultant, and the board didn't take action to adopt or approve it. The board took the report, it was reviewed, and it was used to help inform what followed next. What followed next was we heard community concerns. People agreed with components of the plan, disagreed with others, wished to discount other components of the plan. And so LCUSD slowed the work on the DEI initiative. They wanted to take in all the feedback, and we wanted to respond to that feedback in a thoughtful and meaningful way. One of the components of feedback was that we needed a committee to dive into the report and to generate its own, guiding docs as well as its own 3-year plan. And so we formed a committee with over 30 participants, and that committee was given the time that it needed to form subcommittees and to generate the plan that's before the board in item 12A tonight. Next slide. So, there were questions about, why we were initiating this work, what were the outcomes and results that we wanted to achieve or realize from the DEI initiative. And so the board and staff took time to listen to that feedback back and really articulate the why. What were the issues that were motivating the interest in a DEI initiative? What were the outcomes that we wished to realize? And what were the nuances that would really make this an LCUSD 3-year plan and a plan guided by the guiding documents of the district? With the framework that initially came out, we told a story. And one of the things that was surfaced by a community member was that the guiding principles in the guiding principles doc was that were actually absent. So we created the 4 guiding principles, and those were reminiscent or exactly identical to the structures that have guided the organization in its decision-making process for the last decade, whether it was dealing with a safety and security issue, whether it was dealing with an initiative on the implementation of the Common Core state standards. Anything that we have dealt with, we have focused on what is in the best interest of students, what ensures safety and security in our facilities and in our relationship, what ensures an academically robust and rigorous educational program. And we're also guided all more recently, but still, and I think in all of our work, by what guarantees wellness and student belongingness. Next slide, Jamie. So we also heard feedback that the community was very concerned that somehow DEI was diverging from our commitment to academic excellence. And so throughout the guiding documents that you'll see here, and then throughout the three-year implementation plan, we have made sure to surface that academic excellence and an academically rigorous educational program are the cornerstones. It's what drives us, and that will never be sacrificed. But there is a very integrated way to proceed with this DEI work while guaranteeing that that is maintained and furthered. We also cited the 3 objectives that we wish as an outgrowth of this work. We want our kids to excel and be successful in a diverse world. We want them to learn and grow from harmful decision-making or areas where they make a mistake. And we want to make sure that staff, students, and families have all of the resources necessary to them so that there is a sense of belonging and that their needs are met from, at the place where they approach us. We identified the positive character traits that we wanted to see in all of our students. We want our kids to be healthy. We want them to be resilient. We want them to be agents of their own destiny. We want them to be empathetic, and we want them to experience a sense of belonging. The board also really wanted that the 3-year implementation plan to be a living document. Thus, you'll see as part of the plan, the creation of a oversight committee. That oversight committee will operate like the bond or the parcel tax or the LCAP oversight committee, where they will meet 3 times a year at the beginning of the year to assess where the district is, mid-year to do outreach to community members to hear about progress, concerns, interests, and to formulate those in comparison to the plan, meeting for a 3rd time to see what recommendations it might make to the living document or to the living plan, and then to present that at a formal meeting in open session to the governing board for the board to consider adopting those recommendations. Again, as part of our chronology of being responsive, we continued to identify wherever we could areas to emphasize safety and security and belongingness. Next slide. This is where we left off, and so if you have been with us all along, we'll reiterate the points on this slide, and then we'll be headed into new territory. So the community feedback were that our definitions were a little dense, and that some of our language was vague. Some of our language was viewed as trigger language that perhaps had unintended meanings than different than what the board or staff was or the subcommittees were intending. So we were intentional to be more streamlined, less vague, and more direct. And even where there were questionable phrases, the board gave direction for us to drill down and really make sure that our meaning and our language was explicit and clear. In the definitions, some of the explaining language that made them dense was instead pulled out of the definition and referenced as an application that we valued, and that would be an outcome or an application of the said definition. We were very clear to articulate core values as an identifying difference under the definition of diversity that was articulated by community members, and we responded there. Again, there were community members that were very interested in making sure that personal dignity of all students, all staff, and all families was respected as part of the application of our diversity definition. So that is included. The definition of equity was totally reworked in response to community concern and feedback. The former definition had read that we would work to ensure fair treatment, fair opportunities, and fair outcomes. The definition now does not include fair outcomes. We are not responsible for outcomes. We're responsible to meet learners and staff and families where they are, to provide differentiated resources as necessary to ensure that every individual achieves to their maximal potential. And so that has changed. And also we have included, I was concerned that we weren't including anything with regard to fair treatment. But if you look at the inclusion definition, that's very, very clear and articulated. So this is an integrated document on how we want students to feel a sense of belonging. And so that treatment would yield a sense of belonging. On to new territory. The 3-year plan has been reworked to, like I said before, provide for a community oversight committee, and they will have a 3-meeting cycle like our other oversight committees do. And so that will be a guarantee to the community that we are continuing our responsiveness and continuing the evaluation of the plan to maximize the intended outcomes. We have stated in the plan where there was concern that HR will continually work to recruit diversified talent pools, but there's very clear language. There's no ambiguity regarding that we will not be hiring for quotas. We will be hiring for the best possible new hires. We will ensure professional development and that this professional development supports teachers in facilitating critical thinking and fostering respectful discussions around these contentious topics so that students feel safe voicing dissent, voicing disagreement, and that teachers have the facility or the skill to have those conversations be meaningful, have those conversations be supportive, and have those conversations really augment and help build in our students critical thinking skills so that they learn and grow from these hard conversations. And that we were also very clear in making sure that professional development always covers or continues to cover a firm knowledge with staff of their legal rights and responsibilities in response to this work, but also in other areas that perhaps could lead them to feel there was a risk or some exposure. On the next slide, there was concern with the terminology affinity groups. And so we did research and we identified another phrase that's used sort of more by sort of the more moderate approach in the bell curve. But these support groups will be identified in 912 by students and built out, maybe in the TK through 8th grade structures might be identified by parents, but we're going to go slow in building the guardrails on these support groups. And the entirety of year 1 will be identifying best practices to establish and structure the groups so that they are contributing to an inclusive climate of care. We're also looking with our student support services and climate of care subcommittee to do another thing, to go slow to go fast. They will be conducting action research because we've heard that some people don't understand the concept of restorative practices. And that's a pretty well-developed practice or program within school districts. But we want to make sure that we are entirely up on restorative practices and that we're clearly articulating what it means to take a response to a poor choice or to a harmful choice or to a disciplinary violation, and to engage in consistent practices which restore both the transgressor and the victim to the community and make sure that we are engaging with all students and all families in consistent ways and ways that build school climate and culture. I know I've said this several times, but again, in terms of reviewing my notes over the past year, there were opportunities to once again build up the emphasis of respect, empathy, and personal dignity. And in this case, it was in the language of restorative practices. Academic rigor was re-emphasized in the 3-year plan under the selection of curricular materials. That has to be the standard by which we select any curricular materials. And there really is a sense of being additive and not subtractive in this analysis and in this evolving of any additional resources. And then finally, there was some concern that we would be sort of engaging in separatist practices by creating a DEI calendar. And so, this sounds like a minor detail, but the emphasis and direction from the committees and the board was to build DEI calendar dates out from the master calendar so that we have one resource, one calendar, and it's inclusive of all of our activities and all of our events, and that would include our DEI calendar dates. Next slide. We have recognized and want to be very transparent. We've heard from our community loud and clear that critical race theory is a subject of contention within our LCUSD community, and that mirrors what we're seeing throughout our state and throughout our nation. We wanted to make a statement here in this sort of preface to the item that as a TK through 12 public educational agency, LCUSD maintains the following. CRT is not an adopted part of LCUSD standards-based instruction. It is not also explicitly identified in the K-12 California state standards. We want families to be clear that examining issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and racism are a part of classroom lessons. They are a part of the instructional program, and they will be discussed in our classrooms at times, developmentally appropriate, using the adopted materials that the board provides, but also ancillary materials that are created and curated by our teachers. When teachers find these materials, we will hold them to the standards that they'll be programmatically appropriate, and these educational materials will emphasize the tenets of LCUSD's guiding principles and DEI commitment statements and definitions as set forth in this guiding document. We also want to be very clear as we move on, and this is in light of critical race theory, that the goal of LCUSD's guiding documents on DEI is not to prescribe any single ideology. It does not ascribe to critical race theory or ascribe to any educational outcome as orthodoxy. Instead, our whole purpose here is we strive to educate our students using California state standards-based academic curriculum and the social emotional learning programs that the district has adopted to foster our students' abilities to think critically. We want them to be discerning citizens who are able to take competing viewpoints and to assess those with their own internal compass, with their own ideological values, think critically and think ably. We want them to be prepared to successfully engage in a diverse world. I've been working very, very hard with our staff and with our community on this topic. And I think that it is, like someone said in our opening comments, it is valuable for a community to engage in hard discussion. I've been consumed thinking about this because we only want to do what's best for our students and what's in their inherent interest as learners. But you get in a car to drive to get some lunch on a board meeting day, and you hear that someone posted in a public agency a picture of an African-American citizen who's been high profile recently, and that person is under scrutiny and likely to be fired. Our decisions and our actions in public and in private have great consequences, more so than as adults we have felt, growing up and being contributing members in our world. We need our students to be aware of how to navigate these very diverse times, these very complicated times, and to do so successfully. And our students, I think, are really, really ready to meet the challenge. They're interested in these topics, obviously in a developmentally appropriate fashion. And we want to make sure that they're learning and engaging about these things in a way that we are able to embrace as an educational community. And so I think that the board and staff, and I give huge credit to our Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Committee, we've created a program that we own and that we can embrace and provide to our children so that it meets the tenets that this community hopefully will be comfortable with. We want to expand their capacity to build positive relationships, and doing all of this with the mindset the North Star that says we treat each other with dignity. We are empathetic to the experience of someone who is different from us, and we meet that relationship, close or distant, with respect. And then finally, in this, leading into this, there's 11A and then 12A. It is asked that the governing board engage in discussions of both items. And the first item will be the guiding documents as set forth in the title of this introduction. And we would ask that the board, because they've had multiple reads of the diversity, equity, and inclusion, background and objectives, guiding principles, commitment statement, and DEI definitions, take action tonight to approve this document. Then it's recommended that the governing board, after review, approve. It's an official first read, but the document has been presented multiple times to the public, but to adopt item 12A. And then we would look in discussion at next steps after the recommended adoption of the district's DEI 3-year implementation plan. So that is the introduction to this item. I'm happy to entertain questions, but I know that we are also interested in going through the guiding document quickly, and fully supportive of board discussion, but this is a document that the board has dealt with quite extensively. So Jamie, if you would post the slide deck. Since our last meeting, this has both the DEI background and objectives, guiding principles, commitment statement, and definitions have been integrated into one doc. So you will not see the formerly AKA known as the orange doc. It's all one. And the first, I want to just be real quick to remind everyone, these are background and objectives. This is the why that I referenced in the introduction. So the next slide, Jamie. This is what we had found, that our kids at times lacked a sense of judgment or empathy, and there was some negative treatment of others on our campuses, and we want to educate away from that. We have seen students feel marginalized and disrespected. They self-report this. They report it on Facebook. It has become a topic of discussion. It has become an issue amongst families. Our students have reported that they have experienced being unsafe, had difficulties making positive interpersonal connections, and they did not feel, some of them, that they belonged on our campuses. And we want every student to feel responsible for their belonging, supported by us, and that they're contributing to and benefiting from a positive school climate of care. And we've had, this was at one point in response to a finding by Carolyn, we have moved from student-centeredness on this, but staff have responded that in reacting to student mistakes and imposing discipline regarding harmful choices or poor judgment calls, they've responded unevenly, and there have been sometimes unintended consequences. And it's the adult responsibility to ensure consistent outcomes so that always students are learning and growing from mistakes. Next slide. And these are just the three, very articulated throughout all these integrated docs. These are the objectives. We want our students to thrive in a diverse world, recognize, embracing, and celebrating diversity. We want students and staff to feel safe, respected, make sure they have positive interpersonal connections on and in our campuses, and to get the support they need, and that those supports meet them where they are, and that they're differentiated because every person comes to us with a different set of academic and SEL needs. And then we want students to learn and grow from their mistakes and our harmful choices, so that we are engaging in restorative practices and making whole the community every time a poor choice is made and there is something taken away from our school community. Next slide. From a staff focus, these are our articulated whys. Staff have reported that they sometimes find it difficult to engage in conversations around DEI topics. And staff have reported that sometimes they haven't responded to issues of student diversity, not realizing the importance of affirming that difference. Staff have also said that at times they have not approached or handled situations in the playgrounds, quads, campuses, throughout campuses, our campuses, because they haven't known how to handle or feel confident in dealing with or guiding students in terms of issues of racism, bias, or discrimination. And there's repercussions, like I said, you know, in this presentation. These are challenging topics, and people are worried about, you know, repercussions that deal with your profession, deal with your reputation. And so sometimes there's the idea of shying away from those, and we need to engage with those fully. Staff members in their own collaborative relationships have felt marginalized and disrespected, found difficulties making positive collegial connections, and we want those environments for staff to also be welcoming and emphasize belonging. And then, you know, as we gauge, you know, where we are with citizenship marks and standards, to have some DEI reference or component potentially with those, so that we're looking at, you know, how is everybody contributing to the climate of care. Next slide. So the outcomes with relations to staff and our objectives there are to make sure that we update and review district policies related to racism, bias, discrimination, and restorative practices. So those are all emphasizing best practices in teaching and learning, providing PD, professional development and training for all staff with regard to these restorative practices, and also the discipline component of restorative practices, which is restorative justice, oversight mechanisms to ensure consistency in adult application of school and district policies, making sure that our long-term plan emphasizes systemic and programmatic approaches so to our PD and to our outcomes, and that we adjust as we go, so that teachers are aware of how to handle situations, and they're also aware of their professional rights and responsibilities in terms of how they respond. Finally, evaluating and expanding our curricula to ensure here that it's academically rigorous, but also that it's culturally responsive. And so that creates a well-rounded and meaningful educational program. Next slide. These are our guiding principles, not in any order. They're identified by bullets and not numerically, but all of our decisions focus on what is the best interest of students, what ensures academic excellence of the educational program that we offer, what ensures the safety and security of students, staff, families, and our school site facilities, and what ensures that our students feel well, connected, a sense of belonging, and that extends to staff and families. And we're nearing the commitment statement. The commitment statement reiterates all of what I've shared tonight. We have environments and experience for students and staff that are safe and welcoming. Our students thrive in a diverse world, that they're safe, respected, they have positive relationships, and they get the support that they need. We learn and grow from our mistakes or harmful choices. That's what a learning community does. We provide an academically rigorous program, but it is also culturally responsive, and it's designed by its very nature to challenge and engage every learner. Here where we call out the educational and life pursuits that we want our children to flourish as they pursue, but they do so with their characters, emphasizing health, resilience, agency, and empathy, and that we adjust this. Here again, we're focusing on a living document. We adjust our practices according to the needs of students, staff, and families as we identify who is marginalized and where the areas of concern come from on our campuses. Here are our definitions. This definition, as was the commitment statement on the last slide, were board approved at the last meeting, and that's why they have an asterisk. But the definition for diversity, LCUSD defines diversity as the array of differences which exist between people. This is not only on a personal, but it's also on an organizational level. Those differences include, but are not limited to, race, ethnicity, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, ability, religion, family structure, age, and core values. And then the application, what we'll see come to life, even in a further fashion. All our campuses do represent this now, but even more so, we will recognize that every person has a unique identity, and our schools will foster and promote environments, relationship, and experience where every student and staff member is welcomed, valued, is safe, and is treated with dignity and respect. Here you'll see on the next definition a very different definition of equity than was presented last time. It's been streamlined and the language is very, very precise. LCUSD defines equity as a system of providing every learner with the resources and opportunities that each needs to reach their fullest potential. In application, what you would see with this is that equity demands that all students, staff, and families be provided with all of the resources, services, and instruction that are required for success. Our understanding as a district of equity recognizes that inequities have served as barriers to success for marginalized groups, and that there is a need for continual reflection and responsiveness to prevent and remedy potential inequities going forward. And then we go to our definition of inclusion. We define inclusion to mean that every member of the community is supported in order to feel valued and respected, that they have equitable access to opportunities, and that they are invited. We believe in invitational education, but they are invited to meaningfully contribute to and help define the culture of the school site to which they belong. LCUSD schools emphasize the daily and intentional. This is an ongoing and daily process. You can't look the other way. We have to make sure that we're nurturing and maintaining the welcoming climate of care. LCUSD schools work to foster a sense of belonging and empathy for all. And finally, it's important to note that this has been vetted up and down, vertically and sideways. The Special Committee on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion has ensured that its commitment statement and definitions are congruent with our guiding principles, and we have ensured that the implementation plan adheres to the guiding principles and the DEI commitment statement. So thank you for listening. We've run through this numerous times, but this is the final draft brought to the governing board for adoption tonight.
Thank you, Wendy. Jamie, can you go to without the shared screen, just so I can see everyone on gallery view as we begin the discussion. So the goal was for Wendy to present. Thank you everyone for joining us. And then we'll go ahead and continue with some discussion now. I do need someone to begin the conversation and then with a motion. However, once we do that, we do a discussion. We'll hear public comment and then we'll come back with more discussion and then take a vote with whatever the next direction will be. I do have to catch myself and correct an error I made as well. At the beginning of the meeting, I was to read a comment about public comments. So I'd like to do that right now, just to make sure it's on record. So forgive me, we're gonna just digress a little bit. On March 17th, 2020, our governor issued Executive Order N2920. Under this new order, a district can now comply with public attendance and comment requirements of the Brown Act by holding a meeting via teleconferencing and allowing members of the public to observe and comment either telephonically or otherwise electronically. Public comments are being accepted online, as you all know, and will be read by district staff after board discussion of the presented items. Thank you for letting me correct myself. And so we'll move on to discussion. So let's open it up for discussion right now based on what was presented by Wendy, and thank you so much. And Dan.
Hey, Madam President, can we just explain how we're going forward now that we've moved to Facebook? I was just looking at the site Down Detector, and it shows that there's something like 207,000 reports of YouTube being down. So it's a widespread outage on YouTube. And it is not just the district. It is not a problem on our end. It is a problem with YouTube. I think our district has made every effort to notify the community of the change and where we're going to be available. The number of people currently on the Facebook feed is 33. That's more than we had on the feed under YouTube. So I think we've done a good job of getting the message out so that we've had everyone. I think you would liken it to a situation in the real world if you're in one meeting room and the lights go out and you move across the hall to another meeting room and you tell everyone in the meeting room we're moving across the hall, and you post something on the door saying we're moving across the hall. And when you get to the other side of the hall, there are more people there than there were in the first room. I think you're pretty confident that we've gotten the message out. So I just wanted to put all that out there to make sure that if anyone's concerned about Brown Act issues, that I think we've done a good job of addressing everything as much as we can.
I think
Jamie says we're now up to 44 people watching on the Facebook feed. So the emails went out to everyone. I know I got 3 copies of the email telling them on Facebook. So I think the community knows we've moved to Facebook.
Thank you, Dan. You're absolutely right. I had made those comments earlier, but I'm glad you clarified it again for any new community member that has joined us, and I truly appreciate the involvement from the community. So thank you. Okay. Having clarified that, and we'll move forward. I do need a motion to begin the conversation now that the presentation has completed. Joe, you've made a motion to.
Yep, make a motion to start conversation on definitions and all the other content.
Okay, I do want to just clarify that this is a motion with a potential vote because it does have an asterisk with it. So thank you, Joe. Do I have a second? Oh, yes, Wendy?
Just to clarify that this is the second read item. It's first. It has been, we've had actual multiple reads of it, and the recommendation is for action to approve.
Correct. Thank you so much for the clarification. I keep looking at first read items after second read. It's just one of those nights, everybody. Thank you. All right. So Josh, I think you raised your hand for a second. Did I have that correct?
Yes. So are we gonna, so is the motion just for discussion, or are we gonna make a motion to approve right now?
No, we're going to make a motion. The motion is to begin the discussion and open up the discussion now that we've heard the
Okay.
presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll take a second to that.
Thank you. So Josh is a second. Joe made the motion. Josh has seconded. All right, everyone, let's begin the conversation. Questions, comments, feedback from the board? Joe.
So, I mean, if you remember correctly, we were pretty close to pulling the trigger on approving last time around, and we caught ourselves wordsmithing on the fly, and we just wanted to pause. We felt that we kind of knew the direction. We're probably 90% there, but we wanted to step back. And I think we've stepped back in a nice way because we used that time in a way to go through a couple more iterations. Here's some more feedback from the public, the community, et cetera. And I think we made some nice adjustments like Wendy kind of alluded to in the beginning. We approved the commitment statement. We approved already the diversity issue. So it's really down to, the diversity definition, the definition around equity and the definition inclusion, and then the guiding principles. I'm pleased the builds, Wendy and I spent time, and the committee spent time thinking through the equity and the feedback from the community, the concerns over trying to orchestrate or guarantee outcomes. We pulled that back, was more direct. I'm as comfortable as I'm going to be right now on the equity definition. I'd leave it at that. Inclusion, Dan had some good feedback on how dense that was, and we were putting too much in the definition around inclusion. That got streamlined. That looks pretty good right now. And I really like, that we answered the community's concern over not having guiding principles really called out. So Wendy, nice job pulling all that together. And I know there's been a lot of discussion behind the scenes. So I'm feeling pretty good about how far we've come. We were close last time, but now we've even taken this time to get even tighter.
Thank you, Joe. Any other comment? Caroline?
Now, I want to thank the committee for all their work because I know this was not easy, but it's time to get something done. We've really tinkered with it. We're never going to get to a perfect place where everyone is going to be happy with every single little word that we're going to put out there. We can't start anything until we get these things passed. So we really need to dig down deep and take the big step. And this is a living document. This isn't Moses's tablets. We can go back and revisit 3 times a year. The oversight committee is going to revisit things 3 times a year. So I am wanting us to move ahead.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. I appreciate the comment about the fact that this is a living document as we've experienced over the last 15 months or so, that it is important to have everyone's feedback. And then as we begin to discuss what the next iteration is going to be for oversight, I think it's imperative that we understand that this will continue potentially to evolve. So again, absolutely. Thank you. Any other comments? Dan?
I think I'd agree with that. I think Wendy and the committee and all the cabinet have done an outstanding job of taking some documents and really making them ours, making them the real LC La Cañada feel, where instead of feeling like we're borrowing someone else's language and borrowing someone else's concept, we're really applying it to our district and trying to define the terms as they fit our district. And I think it's especially important, as Wendy explained, what we're not talking about doing and what we're not doing. And I think that's just as important to reassure the community that we're not talking about doing certain things. So I'm reminded of the famous quote by John Wooden that if you can't find the time to do something right, when are you going to find the time to redo it? And I think that this is really important. This is critical work for us to get started on, and it's critical work for us to have these discussions and make sure we are all looking at the definitions and looking at what we mean, and not putting anything out there that we don't understand and that doesn't apply to La Cañada. So I'm very comfortable with the progress that we've made on it. I agree with Caroline that we can't have every word exactly the way we would all like it. We'd be here for years. But I think the work that Wendy, her staff, the administrators of the schools, the committee have done have gotten us to the point where I feel very comfortable that this applies to our district.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot be more grateful and more impressed and in awe of the participation of the community members on our committee, how they have contributed so much and guided and informed our steps we move forward. Josh.
Yeah, I echo what everybody's saying about kudos to the committee for working so hard. And I also want to call out, I really think we turned the corner when Joe, and Joe, forgive me, others forgive me if you were working with other people, but when we sort of rethought this as a student-centric document, we really started to think about the student experience, and that just shines through the entire thing right now. And I think that is excellent work. And one of the things that, I think over the time we've been bogged down with this idea that this is a referendum on just on race or on single issues, but really this is about all of our students and making sure that anyone who is on the margins is included, whether it's because of race or sexuality or learning differentiations. And I just think the document has gotten to a really nice place. So thank you to the committee. Thanks to board members on the committee as well for really steering this and helping us get to this place.
Good point, Josh. I have to say that as a district, when we began several years ago, over 4.5 years ago, looking at safety and security and wellness in general, and in trying to secure or to find out and to inform ourselves as to what's going on with our students, our staff, etc. This is just another aspect of it. This is just an iteration as we continue to really delve into what's the best for our school community. So any other comments before I move on to public comment? Okay, so Jamie, if we can begin to look at public comment. And again, the public comment is really, we can't really engage in dialogue, but if there's a need for any particular clarification, we can do that and we'll just move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, just give me a second. Let me get it queued up for you.
While you're getting it queued up, Jamie, I have to say, and we talked about the committee, but I think it's important to highlight that we've had student voices on the committee. I think that it's important for the community to know that, the community at large to know that. And we've had the voices of alumni members as well. So that was important feedback. Thank you, Jamie.
Sure, sorry, just getting the right screen. There we go. Okay. Our first comment comes from Jane Edwards, community member, and Jane writes, I see that the school board members, together with the superintendent who initiated this, are pursuing this Marxist, racist, and extremely divisive agenda full throttle in the name of keeping kids safe. Your mission to create safe and welcoming environments for all students should not be some new thing. Let's say it like it is. It's cover for critical race theory being slammed down our throats. There's so much wrong with this, and your limitations on dissent make a fair airing of these issues impossible. You are clearly not interested in fairness and doing what is best for all of our kids based on this sham open process and the critical race theory warrior you hired to develop this sad program. You patronize those of us who oppose by giving us the opportunity to offer 3 minutes, which you read and then move along your destructive course, saying it's to keep our kids safe. In the many decades I have lived here, I've never been more disappointed and saddened by our city and its leaders.
So Jamie, I mean, I think that it's important, since this is the last read potentially of this item, that we take a little bit of time to respond. So I'd like to first say that it was not, I didn't initiate this. This work has come at the behest of students, staff, and families. One of the initiating events was at a family forum where there were over 50 families, and there was a overwhelming request for us to pursue this work or look into furthering this initiative. It is a nationwide initiative. It is a statewide initiative. If we stay asleep at the wheel, we will be dictated to on how we pursue this. This is a lot of hard work and effort to put the LC stamp on it so that we're addressing this issue according to the needs and interests of our own community. We've tried to make a very articulate statement tonight that it is not cover for critical race theory. We are not espousing critical race theory. I talked with Ms. Edwards extensively on the phone. I thought we had a productive conversation. I felt like when we finished the conversation that there was some understanding of what we're pursuing. Obviously, it's not just the 3 minutes that she's being offered here. There is a lot of discussion that's gone on. My only hope is that if the board does pass this document and the 3-year plan, that over time, we will be able to demonstrate to her the intention with which we are producing, or that we're pursuing this work, and that it really is for the best interest and in deference to the education, the full education of our children, and that there is no hidden agenda here, and that there is nothing nefarious, to which she remarks.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Ms. Edwards. I am concerned about the disappointment, but I do appreciate the sharing, but definitely it was not just one person beginning the conversation and the move of this initiative. Let's move on. Jamie?
Thank you. The next comment comes from Mari Gothheim, LCUSD parent, and Mari writes, "Thank you for revising the framework and definitions. There is still some problematic language, such as the need to prevent and remedy potential inequities going forward under application in the definition of equity. Similar language has been used as rationale for eliminating standardized testing and differentiated math pathways in high school. For example, the draft 2021 mathematics framework currently under review by the Instructional Quality Commission of the California Department of Education specifically recommends the elimination of calculus in high school because it exacerbates inequities," and the citation is included. "I recommend you replace the words prevent and remedy potential inequities with support every learner. We need to both support students who are struggling and at the same time nurture those who excel far beyond other students' abilities, whether in math, science, creative writing, music, athletics, community service, etc. Don't wipe out, in the name of equity, opportunities for students to excel."
Thank you, Ms. Gotham.
And thank you, Mari, for the comments. I'm aware of, got forwarded today, the opinion commentary that was printed in the Wall Street Journal. And so know exactly what you're talking about. We have bolstered this work and really highlighted at every corner that our commitment to our community is the academic excellence, the robust and rigorous academic educational program. I know that your children excel in mathematics. I would do nothing as your superintendent, nor would anyone on cabinet, anyone in the school sites. And we've put the protections in place, and we will continue to do so that students can advance and excel according to, this is the differentiation that we're committing to here, is as much for our struggling learners as it is for our proficient learners who want to achieve and who are able to achieve at an accelerated rate.
And the board continues the report as well. Josh?
Sorry, Wendy, just to address something that, could you clarify if there were to be changes to the curriculum in any way? This isn't carte blanche to just make changes, correct? The curriculum would have to go through normal channels to make any changes to the curriculum moving forward.
All that is guided by governing board, board policy, administrative regulations. There are, extensive procedures and guidelines. There would be community staff, community, if it was at the upper level, student input. It would all be vetted through committee work. It would come to the board for 2 reads. So this doesn't supersede any of the structural procedures that are in place that guarantee that, the board as the elected official has the obligation to the community, but there's nothing that can happen without board approval. And there are mechanisms in place to ensure the full vetting of any decision that the board would make.
Okay.
Jamie, would you like me to read some?
Please, thank you.
All right. The next comment is from William Schultz, community member. At various times during LCUSD's DEI discussion, the board and others may have wondered, how can anybody be opposed to equity? Most board members and parents are of a certain age, and we were raised to believe that equity meant impartiality, a freedom from favoritism. That is not the equity that the LCF community is now standing up to oppose. In 2021, words with pre-existing emotional associations are intentionally redefined to mean something else, often their opposite. CRT has now done this to equity, and it is this replacement version that we object to. Equity is commonly described with the following image. A group of people are bicycling. There is a bike trailer for the toddler, a small bike with training wheels for the preschooler, a larger bike for the older brother, a full-size bike for the father pulling the bike trailer. Equity, the image says, means giving people different support in accordance with their different needs. The bicycling image displays a kind of discrimination, that is, believing there is a difference between multiple things and treating them differently as a result. However, nobody would protest the image's ageism. Why? The answer, of course, is that the difference between youths and adults is real, so the different bikes are appropriate. Not even in 2021 would people suggest that the father would be stuffed in the bike trailer. Equity proponents then proceed to skip quickly over the intermediate reasoning. They conclude that jobs, government grants, college admissions, scholarships, and other opportunities should be given preferentially to people of some races over people of other races. But that intermediate reasoning is exactly where the rub is. What is the underlying substantive difference that justifies penalizing Asian American teens' college applications? The right answer is there is no such difference. The discrimination is unjust. It is racist, but racism is the natural fruit of critical race theory.
The next comment comes from Jill Sony, an LCUSD parent, and Jill writes, watching the last meeting, the board discussion that followed about definitions of terms was hopeful. However, new information has come to light about what is happening at our schools. Before approval and or official implementation of a decided upon DEI plan that further decimates hundreds of parents' faith in the district's intentions, a few things were learned. One, district leadership is actively encouraging teachers and staff to take part in DEI trainings to advance on the pay scale. Is this bribery? Two, certain elementary school principals are offering DEI diversity trainings focused on white fragility to staff during collaboration days. Is this appropriate? Three, middle school teachers are providing lessons and commentary about abortion to 8th graders, which reports of one teacher reprimanding a student for expressing dissent about the subject matter, politicization and shaming in science class. Suggested curriculum being circulated among elementary school teachers include resources from learningforjustice.org and LEGO, both sites with content dedicated to activism, dividing students by race, and furthering politicized efforts like critical race theory and BLM, each of which is founded upon the philosophies of victim versus oppressor, educating kids to be leftist activists. I could provide more examples. Principals, teachers, and staff are allegedly implementing DEI practices prior to a plan being approved against reassurance that the district will not include CRT from district leaders. Our children do not deserve to be brainwashed with activist-based education. This year, no one has been more disappointed in the direction that LCUSD is headed than me. I used to be this district's biggest cheerleader. God bless the wonderful teachers who continue to educate in an unbiased way. We appreciate you. For the parents still afraid to speak up or those not paying enough attention, start. It's already too late.
Jamie, do you want me to read the next one, hon?
Yeah, is there anything that we wanted to respond to in this one or just go to the next one?
I think, yeah, Wendy, I'm not sure. I mean, some of the, I think we'll just move on to the next one. Thank you, Jill, unless you have something you want to add, Wendy?
I would just say that, you know, there is language in our contract for teachers taking courses that can move them along the pay scale. If there is coursework in diversity, equity, inclusion that's either produced by LACO or that has come to Dr. Craddock's attention, it might be shared out, but she shares out continually opportunities for staff development and growth. You know, I think that staff work collegially to review materials. And so there may be readings, but I also feel like, you know, you want your staff to be well educated. It's part of the critical thinking that we're espousing. You know, there's no educating kids to be leftist activists We want our kids to be informed, critical thinkers who are able to discern information that has competing points of view and internalize it in a way that's articulate and is representative of who they are and their own values. We will work very hard, and I think we've been committed to this all along as a district to support students in their own difference. I mean, it's as much a part of DEI to support the students that Jill is referencing here, who right now, they might be part of the right who feel marginalized. It's incumbent upon us to reach out to those learners equally. And I would hope that we get to a place that students are exchanging ideas based on viewpoints and research and documents, and not identifying necessarily who's right and who's left, but how to be critical thinkers and contribute meaningfully, from both sides to the fabric of our community, to the fabric of our state, and to our nation. That's incumbent upon us as educators. And there's specific examples here. I'm not going to speak to each one, but thank you for pointing things out. But there's no, like I said, there's no hidden agenda here. The work is going to be as supportive of your students who may feel right now like they are being marginalized. Well, then we have a task to take hold of to make sure that they're feeling included.
I think that's the underlying message across the board, but I just want to clarify that no one is being bribed to do one training over another.
No.
Just for clarification.
Thank you. The next comment comes from Ashley Grace, LCUSD community member, and Ashley writes, I strongly urge this board to vote to approve the LCUSD DEI background and objectives, guiding principles, commitment statements, DEI definitions, and the DEI plan at a glance, and take action to formally adopt them tonight. Allowing for community opposition to delay this any longer would be an embarrassment to the vast majority of La Cañada community, which supports and defends the DEI program. LCUSD should be on the right side of history on this topic, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because we will turn away the support and commitment of families considering the public education system over our competitive private schools if we do not prove to care about all children and all community members. It is time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie, you want me to read the next one?
Please.
This one's coming from Justin Ike, LCUSD parent. I am a homeowner in La Cañada, a parent of an LCUSD student, and a teacher at LCHS. I wanted to provide my full support for the DEI initiative, which has been proposed by the district. The foundation of the DEI framework as outlined by the district is compassion, kindness, and an empathetic understanding of others. It is absolutely imperative that we prepare students to thrive in a diverse world by ensuring that students and staff feel safe, respected, and have positive interpersonal relationships. I encourage the board to formally and fully adopt the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. Next one is Ethan Engold, the LCUSD parent, does it say? No,
Community member.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the governing board members for the way they addressed the DEI definitions and statements that were up for first read at the last meeting. Your responses and constructive feedback reflected a healthy approach of critical thinking and curiosity. The discussion you had identified both strong points and points of potential improvement, which created a direction for revision. Your conduct in the face of heavy scrutiny has been exemplary.
The next one comes from anonymous parent. The district website has taken down the DEI reference materials for parents to see and places under construction. I want to know why all of the same reference materials and more are still up for teachers to access and build lesson plans off of. Seeing some of the reference materials online that teachers have access to is 100% critical race theory. I am deeply concerned with your ability to be transparent through this whole entire process. We see the long list of teacher materials. This is unacceptable. Critical race theory has no place in our schools. On top of that, I'm really upset that we cannot be there in person to talk this out face to face. It is time.
Can we do the next one, Jamie?
Sure.
Okay. Next comment is from Ellen Multari, a community member. I am so proud of Wendy, her cabinet, and the board for taking on this important, albeit difficult work. No one thought this would be easy, but it needs to happen. It has long been a core value of LCUSD to take on the education of the whole child, including a student's appreciation for the world outside of La Cañada. Creating a climate that fosters an understanding and appreciation of cultural and societal differences allows our students to move beyond the borders of LCF into an ever-connected global community that looks for future leaders who can bridge gaps and channel energies to achieve our collective goals. I celebrate this work and its challenges. I applaud you all for taking on this important task. Our kids will be the better for it.
Thank you.
The next one comes from an anonymous parent. The continued effort to push DEI at LCUSD is laughable. You have continued to bend the meaning of the words meanings, bend meaning of words. Sorry, you have continued to bend the meaning of words meanings. As you all continue to plead ignorance and cover the basis of DEI and its grounding in CRT, we can all read the report and what it states on the flimsiest of facts. We can see the last of candor in the posting of the CR materials on the website. We hear the easily discredited lies. You now call them personal truths in the vocal few members of the community. We see their self-hate spoken here and in public forums. We can read the meaning of minutes where DEI subcommittees members call for the review of equity and GATE programs. We can hear the language of Marxist and neo-racist, introducing the language of Marxist slipping into the public comments from the administration. The exploitation of the decent people of this community will remember. How are we defining struggling sessions today? Equity audits, no more bonds, no more LCEF funding. And the next one is anonymous parent. You really bury the link for comments for the meeting. Congrats. Just to clarify on that one, the meeting comments link was right on the top of the agenda. I double checked. It was in the same place. So this might have been a reference to the new look of the agenda, but the link for the comments was right on the top still.
Jamie, can I just chime in real quick?
Please.
I just wanted to clarify that it is now posted in 3 spots, just in case someone does miss it. It's on the very front of the agenda, as well as in the 2 public comment agenda sections on the actual agenda itself as well.
Thank you, Nairi.
Thank you.
And our final comment comes from Sugi Sorensen, LCUSD parent, and Sugi writes, I wanted to extend my sincere gratitude to Superintendent Sinet for her leadership and tireless work at the district's DEI initiative. I also wanted to thank members of the board with whom I have spoken to, corresponded with, and provided comments to on the DEI issue. Thanks lastly to the members of Superintendent Special Committee on DEI for sacrificing your busy lives to diligently deliberate on these matters for several months. Thank you all for listening and engaging in a civil and ultimately productive dialogue. You were responsive to community concerns and have vastly improved the definitions and guiding documents for our DEI initiative since this effort began over a year ago. I realize and accept that the combined guiding document will most likely be approved tonight does not address all of my concerns or concerns of all of the community, but I also realize and respect that you have the near impossible task of doing what is in the best interest of students, while at the same time trying to please the vastly divergent community interests, concerns, and aspirations. I'm hopeful that the civil discourse you have modeled so well can continue as we move on to the implementation plan. Thank you, Sugi.
Thank you to the community members for the feedback, and we will continue to hear feedback and continue to engage with the community members. And let's go back to our board to see if there's any additional comments, discussions. Joe.
I'd just like to make a motion that we approve the diversity, equity, inclusion, background objectives, guiding principles, commitment statement, DEI definitions.
So thank you so much for Joe. Just for clarification, I'm just going to ask that you make a friendly amendment to your own motion that we adopt. Is that what I'm hearing?
Adopt versus approve, yes.
Okay.
I make the motion to adopt our DEI background objectives, guiding principles, commitment statement. Well, that's already approved. DEI definitions as laid out and discussed.
So now we have a friendly amendment to your original motion from the discussion to the adoption. Do I have a second?
Second.
Caroline got the second. Any other comments, discussion items? I cannot thank everyone enough for all the work that's been placed, but this is just the beginning. So all in favor? I see Josh's hand, Joe's hand, Caroline's hand, Dan's hand, and here's mine, 5-0, adoption of this plan. Thank you so much, everyone. And as I stated, now that we've gotten to this point, we're just at the beginning and moving forward. So thank you, everyone. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, number 12, which are first read items. There are some are asterisked in case we want to adopt vote on adoption. So the first item, 12A, is the LCUSD Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion 3-year implementation plan. I'll ask Wendy to begin the presentation, and then we'll go through the same process. I'll ask for a motion. We'll have some discussion, go out to the public, come back, and we'll move from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie, if you could display the plan, I'll just do the intro with it being demonstrated on the screen. First of all, I want to echo what we've heard tonight with my sincerest thanks to all of the members of the DEI Special Committee. They engaged in really in-depth conversations. It wasn't easy work, and they listened, learned, and grew from divergent viewpoints and modeled what we want to see happening on our campuses, where people come together. They might not agree, but they talk through things, they learn from each other, and they figure out ways to build consensus, even sometimes through disagreement. So we have taken the plan at a glance and made it the cover sheet. This is sort of the elevator pitch, if you will, for the multiple page plan. It starts off with our DEI commitment statement, which the board has adopted. There are 5 components of the plan. There's district and school leadership, human resources and practices, professional development and parent education, student services and climate of care, and curriculum and instruction. And under each header, there is a very short statement about the outcomes that we want to see. Under leadership, provide clear and sustained leadership in this work. Under human resources, recruit, hire, and retain world-class staff. We want to provide under professional development and parent education, the best practices and trainings for staff and families. Under the climate of care and the supports that we provide students, we want to make sure that they get what they need in their educational journey throughout La Cañada. And then for curriculum instruction, we want to deliver a robust and responsive, a rigorous and responsive educational program. So the DEI leads, these are the administrators that have helped to lead the committees. So my heartfelt thanks to Anna Eastwen, Deborah Craddock, Karen Hurley, Jason Ito, Jim Cartnell, Emily Blaney, and Jarrett Gold. They facilitated difficult conversations and worked with their subcommittees to reach plan proposals, actions, and services that I think will serve our community well. If you go to, I'm not going to read the plan to people, but Jamie, if you scroll up, what you'll see is, the model. There is the current year priorities that are listed from January to June 2021, followed by 3 years of implementation, and the 3 years build off of each other. Under district and school leadership, you will find 4 items. To the creation of the DEI guiding docs and the 3-year plan, followed by a DEI plan for the management of the work and the structure, the goals that will be set by site administration and leadership, and then the creation and the implementation of an oversight committee to guarantee transparency and feedback. The plan is a living document. I would say that the document that was just approved by the board will have sort of a longer run in terms of vision and be revisited, sort of in a longer period fashion, 5 to 7 years as recommended by the committees. But this document here is living, and it will take and grow from feedback, strengths, and weaknesses. If you go under the human resource policies and practices, there are 3 items. We're talking about recruitment, interviewing practices, and mentoring and support. So these are the resources and services that we would like to put forward to support existing staff in this work, and then to cast a wide net and ensure diversified hiring pools whereby we hire the absolute best candidates to serve in our district. Under the professional development and parent education, you will find 2 items. We serve to integrate the ongoing training and resources that are provided to staff and the parent education. And so the items, the outcomes and the actions and services are all built out here. Under student services and climate of care, you have the social support groups that will be researched, and the best practices will be identified in year 1. And then in year 2 and 3, those will be built out according to the knowledge gleaned and shared with the community in the out years. Then we have restorative practices, which are how we approach the issues, especially restorative justice, which are our discipline issues, to provide and ensure that we learn and grow from harmful decisions and potential mistakes. And then we have the climate of care, which is at the essence what we're trying to build at each of our 5 campuses. And finally, under curriculum and instruction, there is a single area that is addressed with proposed plan details. Those all deal with curriculum. Happy to address, I know the board has had time to review the plan, as has the community, but if there are items that the board wants to highlight, or if there are questions on any of the projected, plan details with actions and services for implementation, I'm happy to review or answer questions on those.
Thanks, Wendy. Again, I will keep the slides up if you don't mind, Jamie, until we go to public comment. But just to clarify, this is first read items, but we've had several iterations of discussion. This plan has been presented several times, beginning at the retreat at the beginning, or was it in February of 2020? I think we began the conversations. Subcommittee members have worked. I know we have seen this in different various forms. So we do have an asterisk next to it. So let's go to the board right now. Do I have a motion to begin discussion or to open it up for discussion at this point? Anyone? Joe, thank you. Josh, I saw your hand. Can I take you as a second? Thank you, I appreciate it. So we have a motion to begin the discussion and the dialogue about the LCUSD Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion 3-year implementation plan. And we have Josh as a second. So let's go ahead and have some discussion. We'll go to the public and then come back again. Josh.
Just as a testament to how long we've sort of been working on this, Wendy, do you feel like we need to adjust the timelines for the first column, which sort of sunsets in June 2021, or is that something where we can achieve that, or is there any adjustments we need to make there?
Yeah, I think that all of those are well placed. I think that the plan going forward is to have the DEI Special Committee continue, as they're available in working groups for anything that hasn't been accomplished. I know that, for example, Anaisa's subcommittee on professional development and family learning series, they've met their priority items. Deborah Craddock has met hers. My committee is still working on the details on the oversight committee, and I can share out in terms of next steps what their recommendations were going forward, and then we will continue to share out with the governing board any progress on how that is structured. But if we have a potentially July 31st deadline, this is all work that needs to be completed prior to the new school year starting when students come back. All of those should be met.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Joe?
Yeah, I mean, just similar to what I said in the other section, the other agenda item, I've been involved in this, quite a bit, and I've seen the development and iterative refinement of the plan really throughout all the committee work, and the discussion, the respectful discussion, the thoughtful review of content has been very impressive. And so I'm deeply, like I said, involved and participated in this. So I'm comfortable with what it says and the refinements that we've made. But I think bottom line, I just want to reinforce that it's our plan. Okay, it's LCUSD's plan now. And so I'm really proud that the committee met its objective, right, to review what we are given as a starting point And we've refined, rejected, built out, and made it our own based on our own objectives and needs of the community. And I think that's reflected in the end product that we have here. And if things aren't exactly right, once we battle test it, then that's what the oversight team would come in and help us refine, course correct, as we said earlier, right, Wendy? So I'm feeling pretty good about the content as it sits, and appreciate all the committee work to get to the point we are right now. So.
And Joe, thank you for the comment about our plan. And actually, you're right. It's the community's plan, the input, the dialogue. I mean, I've truly appreciated being a part of almost every subcommittee, have been to several meetings. I enjoy listening, and I know I remember telling the curriculum and instruction subcommittee members, I want to sit and listen to what the community has to say, because that really is important to be able to see what's going to happen so that all of us take ownership of this plan moving forward for the benefit of all of our constituent groups. So thank you for that comment. Anyone else?
I think to add to that, we should continue to monitor how the students are feeling about our work, right? And then adjust as needed too, not just adults, but for the kids that are, you know, whatever their teachers are doing. I hope we survey them, and I think that'll help us to continue to tinker with what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Carolyn, I think to your point, I want to reference Mr. Schultz's comments, and those were profound comments. I mean, you know, our generation has different understandings of some of these terms, and you know, and so we want to engage with our youth, and they may have, from, you know, their cultural reference points, you know, and their generational reference points, different understandings. And so we'll need to be on top of that. We'll need to integrate that. And you know, I appreciate his, you know, the way he started out his public comments on the last item with, you know, how could anyone be against these items from our frame of reference? And, you know, if there are generational differences, then we need to be aware of those, and we need to make sure that we take those under consideration, and that we're continually refining and looking for understanding and looking for common language, and you know, making sure that our kids are critical thinkers, and that they're able to build those critical thinking skills in environments that are respectful and that allow for a divergence of thought. You know, this is not meant to, this does not have, you know, and I've talked with Mr. Schultz via email, and, you know, at times he's challenged me on, you know, how could this not be political? But if we ground it in the interest of our students, and we ground it in the interest of quality education that, you know, enforces and supports critical thinking and divergent viewpoints and respect, I think we're better for it.
Thank you, Wendy. And Joe, I think you had your hand up.
It was just a brief, it was just a brief build that I think with the oversight team, Wendy, right, isn't the intention that, to Carolyn's point, that that oversight committee, and I think we just need to make sure it happens, that there'll be a point in time where they can go out and either survey, engage, get feedback, how's it's going, and then that could include feedback from students, parents, that if they want a certain mechanism, and if they want to do a focus group or a survey or whatever they need as the tools to pull it back in and see how we're doing, then I think everything should be on the table for them to think about.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time. I mean, I know we wanted to talk about next steps, but I think that this should inform the board's thinking, you know, as you prepare to vote to adopt this. There were a couple of things that came from the last several meetings. One was that we needed to create a document that was integrated, that, to use your words, Joe, could be socialized out into the community, that could be interactive, that could put into the vernacular of what we've heard from our families about the concerns and why is this important and what are you trying to do, and that could brand the LC program. And so if Jamie, if you could just show on the screen what we've been working on, and it's not done yet, and we have, you know, some work to do, but it'll be the focus of some of our time and attention over the next couple of weeks. But we are trying to create, you know, a document that we can share out with the community, hopefully that the community can sort of, you know, grab a hold of and hopefully be proud of. But, you know, it's about, you know, what is our plan, you know, how to make it student centric and how to put our brand on it. And if you move forward, this is just a sample, but we want to answer people's questions. We want to, we've heard people say, I am not so sure about this. I don't know that we need this. Why is this best for my child? What does this mean? How is this going to look in practice? And so there are links in this document. We've tried to make the language more approachable, and we'll get this out to all of our families so that there's a strong understanding and hopefully a strong ownership of the work. And when we have a disconnect, or when we have ideas that when they come to fruition, they don't meet our expectations, then we rework them. And we've said, we are not legal theorists, that we are not about critical race theory. We're educational practitioners, and our goal is to ensure that our kids get the best possible education, not only, academics, but social, emotionally, and that critical thinking. Josh and I have talked about this quite a lot. We want them to have diversity of thought so that they can understand who they are as human beings going out to contribute in the world when they leave us. And the last slide is just trying to put the definitions in the plan in an easy to read format. Some of what we have dealt with hasn't been either user-friendly or sometimes, polished or sophisticated, and creating a document that does all of these things is one of our next steps. The other next step that I wanted to articulate before the board decides to vote is that the recommendation for the oversight committee is to go out with applications and to put out an application. It would be open to the people who are currently serving on the DEI special committee, but it would also be open to the entire community. And we want to build from the application. We'll have, a combination of board and cabinet members sifting through the applications, but build out a balanced oversight committee so that we have full membership from the diverse viewpoints that we've heard. We know that we have people who are reticent to this plan. We have people who are opposed to this plan, but as long as there's that openness to dialogue, that reasonableness of approach, those opinions are completely valued. As same as we have people who feel like we have gone too slowly. We need to do more. We should have attacked this, years ago. And, we have the bell curve. We have people who are in the middle. So a balanced oversight committee comprised of parents. There will be some staff membership on it. There will be board representation, and it won't be large. It needs to be nimble. It needs to be the size of our partial tax or bond or LCAP oversight committees so that they can go out and do the outreach, bring back, be a very working committee. And I think it would be very appropriate to have a couple of our students on there, again, balanced, so that we're hearing from our kids on both sides. So that would be the oversight committee. When you then get to what happens to the DEI special committee, those people are extremely valued. They've worked very hard where they're interested in continuing the work. They have built the relationships on the subcommittee, and they will naturally be people that we outreach for the working committees, as well as expanding those working committees out. We want to stay open. We want to stay, we got to keep our ears and open and our eyes on the prize. There's good work to be done here, but I think that the oversight committee structure might give people a little bit more confidence in the openness and the transparency with which we are determined to guide and steer this work. And I just thought those were next steps that I think the board should, be able to weigh in on before the vote.
No, absolutely, definitely. Those are important comments, and I think we can continue to talk about it and see how they present themselves. And Josh, I see your hand in just a moment. So definitely looking at the work that's being prepared at this point in order to communicate with the community members, extremely important. And you're talking about an interactive process. That document would be somewhat interactive with links. Is that what I'm?
Yeah, the links would take you to answers if you have questions. And then at the end of the document, we would be building out, places where we could record progress and have it on the website so people could see, when our meeting's going on, what work is being accomplished, who's on, there's just some blank slides where we can, post current information.
Okay. Yeah, and definitely want to continue with really dialoguing about how we're going to have oversight and continued work, and really continue to learn from the expertise of all of our subcommittee members. Josh.
I wanted to, as this sort of melds a couple of things, the plan and next steps and everything, but and forgive me, I don't remember exactly when we talked about this, if it was today or another day, but we've talked about this idea of teacher training and what that is, and we've heard some comments about teachers sort of dipping their toes into diversity discussions already and how that works. And I wanted to just clarify, because I think you and I have talked about it, Wendy, and I think maybe we've talked about it in other board meetings, but some of the teacher training is potentially about facilitating these tough conversations, right? It's really about, it's not about ideology. It really is about, okay, how do you get differing viewpoints in the classroom, and how do you have those conversations while keeping things civil, keeping things controlled, and so that I think this teacher training, if I'm not wrong, is all, is not just about teaching what DEI is, but also how to have the conversations.
Right. And then also, I know that, there was concern that we were, promoting this, but, I think the board, we didn't go last year because of COVID, but the year prior, we were in San Diego for the CSBA workshop. Check me, Dan and Joe and Kiteser, if I'm wrong, but 70% of the workshops, or at least a good over 50, were on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is something that as an educator, you must interface with, you must learn about, so that you can do exactly what Josh was saying, facilitate the hard conversations, maintain an environment that is respectful and open, and that can air differing points of view and can support kids in formulating their systems of beliefs, and can lead them to go home and have conversations with their families so that they can understand sort of, where the family values are and how all this works. And then there's just, we're like LACO or not, Los Angeles County Office of Education, we are part of it. And, all of their, a large majority of their workshops that they're pushing out, those are what teachers have access to. And those are things that do move you along the salary schedule if if they have continuing education units associated with them. And so, right or wrong, that's the environment that we're in. And the stamp on our plan is allowing our work to be strategic and intentional and to serve the interests and needs of our community. It's not, something that's been dropped down from the state or from LACO. We have worked really, really hard for over 2 years, intentionally hard over the past year, to put the LC brand on this, so that hopefully, and it will continue to change and grow, but we want to meet the needs of our families and serve the interest of our students.
Thank you. Dan.
I think you're right, Wendy. I think there was a lot of discussion of it at that meeting about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think a lot of it at that meeting kind of comes back to one of the things that you're working on in the additional document that you showed us, and that is, how is the district intending to implement all this? Because it's that old saying about the proof is in the pudding. I think that's what a lot of people are kind of thinking. Okay, so far I like everything I hear, I see where we're going with all of this, but what exactly does it mean? What does it mean to us? Are we going to change this? Are we going to change that? And I think that getting those details out to the community would be very helpful. So I appreciate that that's the next step. And I think that's a great way to go forward with making it a little more explicit as to what the district will be doing and what the district will not be doing.
Thank you, Dan. Good point. Yes, Joe, you had your hand up? No? Okay. All right. So if you're comfortable at this point, I'd like to go out to the community and see if there are any public comments.
Yes, let me get that up for you.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right. Our first comment comes from Michelle Jones, LCUSD parent. And Michelle writes, I have 4 main questions on this item. First, what do you all mean when you say school site administrators are going to monitor site demographics? Are you all going to analyze the demographics of the students or teachers and staff? And what specifically will be done with this information? Clearly trying to influence group characteristics through quotas or other means would violate board policy 0410 that provides for equal opportunity for all individuals that is free from unlawful discrimination. So please provide specifics about what you all plan to do with this information. Second, when you all say you want to encourage staff to deepen their knowledge and skills through outside coursework that can also advance them on the salary schedule, are you going to make this training available to the public? Any coursework that has financial incentives tied to it should be made transparent to the public. Third, you all want to provide resources to parents regarding restorative practices and their impact on student success and on raising good citizens and leaders in a globalized society. How much money will be earmarked for this and what is being taken away from in the budget? Fourth, can you clarify how you plan to select members for the LCUSD Oversight Committee? Are you all going to ensure you pick from a diverse set of perspectives and opinions when forming this group to be reflective of all the community at large? Last year, when the committee was selected for school reopening, the process was not transparent, nor did it seem to be reflective of the parent community at large.
Thank you. And I think 1 or 2 of the comments have been clarified. The fact that we're still working towards clarifying how the committee is going to be, oversight committee. You mentioned already it's a major plan, but we'll get more specific details as we move forward. Is there anything else you want to clarify, Wendy?
Well, I just think, I mean, I'd like to just briefly go through all of them. They're excellent points and good questions. So for the first one, when you say monitor site demographics, I think it's incumbent upon an administrator to know who they're serving at their school site. So it's not about quotas. It's not with staff. I mean, like we said, we want to cast for staff diverse nets so that we have, you know, a whole wide ranging pool of candidates, but we will select and hire our new hires based on who is the best qualified, who is, you know, the best candidate for the position. But, you know, we want to, you know, we know who our subgroups are. We know that we have a large Asian American and Pacific Islander subgroup. We also know that one of our subgroups is our special education population. But we need to, you know, be aware of those groups. They ebb and they flow. They change over time. They're not designed by us. The people that move into our community are the people who move into our community. The people who apply for permits, you know, we have our permit system on a lottery. So there's no quotas, but as people come into our district, it's important to know, you know, sort of, you know, who they are. Now, you know, background, ethnicity, race, that doesn't, you know, all define a person. We have to get to know them as individual learners and individual staff members and individual families. But as you're looking at trends, as you're looking at resources, as you're looking at services, that, you know, you want to know who your population is, and part of that is you monitor your demographics. We're also legally required to do that in terms of, you know, seabeds reporting and all of the reports we file to the state. You know, we've got, I mean, I can get acronyms to no end. You know, we've got LCAP, we've got the CSP, we've got everything that, you know, we have to file those when we take our standardized tests. So it is part of the job of administrating. And so we are following the guidelines of free from unlawful discrimination, but you also have the obligation to know who you're serving and who you're employing and who your families are. Secondly, we want to encourage staff to deepen their knowledge and skills. So they, you know, they go and staff does coursework. We bring in professional development. You know, to qualify for continuing educational units, there are board policy and administrative regs and the contract that guide all of that. And so, you know, you can't just go out and do anything you want. You're bound by those guiding documents in terms of how you advance on the salary schedule. You know, a lot of that coursework is approved by HR or approved by site administrators who have to vet it through HR. So individuals are approaching different things. When an individual does something, typically, you know, sometimes the site administrator will know, you know, and get the materials, but we don't have a system of being able to make that transparent to the public. We can work on that, but a lot of that is an individual educational route that, you know, that receives permission from HR, but that teachers are pursuing to enhance their professional practice. I think that if we find something that really resonates, then we would pursue a family learning series on it. And that's the professional, the sort of family professional education that we would pursue delivering to the larger community. We want to provide resources to parents on regarding restorative practices. Well, we've had this question come up a lot internally. And so, Mark has been very helpful in identifying, there are limited dollars in public education. And, to speak very candidly, because of our demographics, we are a local educational agency that receives general fund dollars and not so much concentration grant or supplemental grant dollars. So we have to be very careful about and strategic with our resources. We'd get Title II monies that are earmarked for professional development. So within that professional development pot, we would spend some money on teacher training. We do put money aside for the family learning series from the general fund. We wouldn't have all the family learning series offerings be about DEI, but some of them would, because they tend to focus on the district initiatives for the year, what the community expresses that they're interested in that relates to education. So we also have some one-time monies that have come up, and they relate to social emotional learning, the outcomes of the pandemic, bringing kids back on campus. A lot of that is academic, and a lot of that will be assessing learning loss and making sure that we cover all of the instructional gaps. But some of it's going to be just about how kids adjust to being back on campus after a large absence. Some of that will relate to DEI. Some of that is really rooted in inclusion, and kids who are feeling anxiety or confusion, they might need some support with regard to that belongingness on campus. So there are competing dollars, there are limited dollars, but it's the responsibility of us, for us as an organization, to be transparent with how those dollars are spent and to strategically sort of, adjust budgets and move budgets so that nothing is left underserved. And so we're not taking away from anything, we're trying to augment and integrate. And then finally, for the Oversight Committee, I do think I explained that we are looking for balanced representation. And I have to, I worked very hard over the Thanksgiving break, trying to identify based on a rubric, based on the application. It was somewhat of a blind read. I did not know the political affiliation of the people who were selected. They have been hard workers. There has been representation from a diverse viewpoints. We all have received the criticism that there may have been more people interested in supporting of the DEI work than there were people who were either critics or had concerns about it. So we'll work to balance, but there'll be a different approach with an application process and a committee vetting those, and an outcome that's tied to a balanced group. Whereas the outcome last time was about your background with relation to DEI, your interest in DEI, people that we thought we could assess from the application what they could bring to the table to support our efforts. It wasn't, we didn't have as an outcome, we had an interest, but we didn't, I had no way to tell from the applications, people's political affiliations. That's not going to be a focus here, but it is going to be a focus on trying to build a balance of, people who are skeptical and people who are supportive so that we can get the whole range of work done.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay.
Thank you. Our next comment comes from Mari Gothheim, and Mari writes, unlike the framework and definitions which received a healthy amount of public discussion and reworking over the last few board meetings, the draft 3-year implementation plan is much more problematic. It calls for a sweeping and transformational program across all district activities, including parent education, teacher and staff training, hiring practices, curriculum, disciplinary practices, etc. The plan provides so little detail that it's impossible to evaluate. For example, the education and training provided to parents, teachers, and staff may be simply to review and understand the adopted DEI framework and definitions, or will the substance and content of the training be the same woke/CRT literature, Kindy, D'Angelo, 1619, etc., that were recommended by the district's DEI consultant and that until recently were posted and recommended without any balance or opposing viewpoint on the district's DEI website. In a recent national poll, 74% of U.S. U.S. adults said they didn't want schools teaching that white people are inherently privileged or that people of color are inherently oppressed and victimized, with a citation. Several governing board members have stated it is not the intent of the district's DEI initiative to impose or implement critical race theory. If that is not the intent of the board, a disavowal of CRT should be stated expressly in the framework and/or the action plan, or else you're opening the door to the same kind of racially divisive indoctrination that has in other places undermined the community cohesion and collaborative student culture we all want for our kids. In addition to a statement against CRT, it would help if the proposed DEI Oversight Committee was balanced from an ideological standpoint on rigorous survey questions such as those used in the national poll cited above.
Oh, Wendy, can you clarify? And I'm sorry, did I hear somebody else wanting to say something? Okay, so Wendy, can you just clarify one or two points in this comment? And thank you, Ms. Cawthon.
Sure. No, thank you, Mari. I appreciate your, good points, good questions. So the plan is part of what what the plan does is gives you the overall view. What are the goals, actions, and services, and then how we build out how that work will be done will be shared out. I think that we are living in a time where the public is demanding transparency. And I think in order to be successful, we will have to deliver on that transparency. So as the plan details, are identified by working groups or by administrative groups or by student-led groups, we will share that out. So you're right. As with all plans, you can't include everything. If you look at our local control and accountability plan, it's built in the same way, and that is approved by the state and adopted. And then we work on building out the details. And as that work comes to fruition, it gets shared, and we'll make sure that it's evaluated and known by the community. So we also know that we've heard very clearly from our audience about what will be appropriate things for parent education, teacher and staff training, and what we're not either going to, what would not be well received, what we're not ready for, or what will never be well received. And so when the question reads, or will the substance and content of the training be the same woke CRT literature? No, it won't. It will be about how do we achieve the student-centered and staff-supportive directives that are in the plan. Now, somebody referenced the, I know it as by its old name, the teaching tolerance, and I personally, and I can be wrong, but I wouldn't describe that as woke CRT. I think there are very good programs that are research-based. For example, the Speak Out program, and so we will vet those things through our families, but there are programs and resource materials that we will use, and they will be public, and if people have issue with them, I'm sure we will hear about it. And if we need to demonstrate why we're using it, we will. And if we go to demonstrate why we're using it and someone points out why it shouldn't be used, we will be reflective and we can take a step back. We will have the committee be balanced as we've committed to, and I will be happy to look at your link here, because it might have some valuable feedback on selection processes to create balanced committees. There's no intention for racially divisive or indoctrination. This is work that's designed ultimately to be inclusive. And I don't think there's anything that we want to tear the community apart. We want to build inclusive environments so that families, community members, staff, and kids feel like they have a home in LCUSD.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. I think the continued engagement of the community is essential in this work. So thank you so much.
Jamie, do you want me to read some?
I'll take this one. You can take the next one if you want.
Okay.
Thank you. This next comment comes from William Schultz, LCUSD community member, and William writes, "Thank you for planning to conduct exit interviews with families who leave. It would have been so useful during this past year. Thank you for also planning to train staff to facilitate critical thinking and respectful discussions around contentious topics. This is a critical need for our age. I do have some questions and concerns. Will management or consultancy potential hire of the LCUSD DEI initiative be vetted to make sure their understanding of DEI aligns with the district's, or will it smuggle in the most radical forms of critical race theory against the wishes of parents and without their knowledge? Will the citizenship standards, including DEI metrics and grading guidelines, pressure students to pretend conformity to radical, politically divisive ideas in order to maintain good grades? This has happened for so long in college classes that it's practically traditional, but it would be a shame for it to spread down into primary and secondary education. How will the HR equity audit judge whether HR has been equitable? If equity means fairness, this is notoriously difficult to do. And so all too often, organizations test against equity of outcome, and this is statistically impossible to achieve in almost any real world situation. So it always guarantees a source of grievance. For more information, read Discrimination and Disparities by the renowned Black economist Thomas Sowell. To increase objectivity and selection recommendations and interviewing practices, will the district anonymize applicants' names, addresses, and other proxies for ethnicity to ensure the ethnicity doesn't affect selection? When the district adds courses which highlight experiences of marginalized groups, which academic courses will be displaced to make room for these new additions? Teachers, classroom, and funding for curricula are limited resources.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I'm not sure, Wendy, do you want to comment on one or two of them? I think you've already highlighted a couple answers.
Sure. Based on the recommendation from the subcommittee that would obviously need to be approved and or changed or adjusted by the board for management or potential consultancy of the initiative, I would imagine that with the level of community interest, there would be a very, very public and transparent vetting so that the potential hire would be comfortable with and also espouse the DEI plan that has been vetted by the district and has the LC stamp on it. When you talk about citizenship standards and grading guidelines, I think we're talking about building in standards that already exist but are uncodified, and they're developmentally appropriate for demonstrating how students engage and interact and cooperate and all of those things on campus. And we'll take a look at this, and at each school site, probably elementary, middle school, and secondary. And there may be opportunities to identify standards that are developmentally appropriate, that also talk about how do you build inclusion, how do you build belongingness, how do you contribute to the culture of your school, and just to be able to, through a citizenship grade, applaud a student who's doing really, really well and support a student who might need some work there. HR equity audit, Deborah Craddock is doing an amazing job. She is, attending all kinds of workshops, some sponsored by LACO, some sponsored by, public, private agencies, but that are more common to the public, like Indeed and, the hiring groups that are out there. LinkedIn is another source that she used. EdJoin is another source. And so she's busy collecting best practices, and I can't speak to those right now, but again, all of those are good questions and all neat things we need to be aware of going forward. That relates to the interview practices as well. We're looking at industry standards in education and in the broader, outside business world, private sector, and looking at best practices and looking to see how we can adopt those. And then with regard to courses, I think people are aware that down the pike from the state, you may have the requirement to have an ethnic studies course. And so we're trying to get ahead of that so that we can adopt a course that aligns with, the district framework, the district guidelines, you are right, there are limited resources. So where would that get built in? We have kids that pretty much know that we got a really strong AP track out there. I don't think that that's going to change. We have kids who are really interested in, the sciences. We have, students who have a passion for foreign language. Kids walk, vote with their feet. And so if we put a course out that is an offering and kids are interested in it, they'll sign up for it. We only have so many sections available in the master schedule. When something, if we float a course and the board adopts it and there's no one interested in, we won't fill it. If it is a course that's, very, very, student interest is peaked, then something else will shrink. And we adjust that with, the appropriate measures. Either a teacher teaches another course, or we find, a way to, not hire a position so that we can balance out the course offerings. But, you can be very assured that we can put out all the course offerings in the world, and what kids are going to take depends on their interest, and they vote by signing up. And so, there are adjustments made all the time, and this will be no different.
Thank
Wendy,
you.
if I could add just one thing about the hiring piece that I just found interesting. So I recently participated on a podcast, and it featured women in technology, like women leaders in technology, because we're pretty rare apparently. So there is DEI work being done by some professional groups in the state to help raise awareness of challenges that women may face. And one interesting thing that they mentioned, I think this came from a Harvard Business Review article, that when a woman applies for a job, she looks at the application, she looks at the job description, and if she feels like she can meet 90% of the qualifications, she will apply, where a man will see 10% and apply. And so that study made me think that perhaps the technology job descriptions that I have written and updated may potentially be barriers to women thinking that they could apply for that job, because we get very few women who apply for the technology positions. So again, that's a completely different lens in which we can examine some of our HR practices and just have an awareness of ways we may have people not applying that could be completely qualified and just be turned away.
Thank you, Jamie. We'll go ahead to the next comments, and we've covered quite a bit of clarification, so we'll see what the next couple of public comments are as we move forward. Thank you.
And Ashley Grace, community member, please do not delay in passing this implementation plan. It signals to all existing and entering parents that the leaders in our community seek to serve our children rather than prioritize the loudest dissenting voices of fear, seclusion, and hate. It is not worth anyone's time to lift up the hate and racism in our community. The simple fact that it exists is shameful enough. Instead of condemning it further, I will simply urge this board to boldly do the job the community voted you to do, which is looking out for the best interest of the children LCUSD is tasked with educating. Those children are growing up in current society. Therefore, we must recognize the challenges that exist in society today. If you will just listen to our children and the comments on these issues of current students, it is clear we must pass and implement this DEI plan in its entirety. Thank you. Next one.
I'll do the next one, Nan.
Okay.
The next one is from Sugi Sorensen. As much as I was surprised and pleased by the evolution of the DEI guiding documents, I am concerned with the present state of the implementation plan. Even more concerning is evidence that some staff within the district have been forging ahead with their own DEI initiatives in classrooms before the board has even approved the guiding documents and three-year plan. This initiative by staff may seem acceptable to the district cabinet and board, but it has come at a price. The lack of oversight has resulted in families leaving the district in part because of the premature DEI actions and the more radical direction taken earlier when pursuing the CRT-based view of DEI. As the most prominent example, I have heard multiple accounts of a DEI identity exercise done in class in grades as low as 4th grade, but up through high school. Variations on this identity exercise include asking students to draw a picture of themselves with various identities. In more extreme CRT-aligned versions of this exercise, students were then asked to identify the privileges that accrue from these identities and possible prejudices they might harbor. This exercise was also led by the DEI special consultant last school year as part of one of her professional development sessions at the high school. Many teachers and students felt discomfort when they were asked to unpack their identities and privileges. As another example, an ethnic studies course was added to the high school course catalog for next year, apparently before it was approved by the board. I keep expecting the course to come up before the board for first and second read, but I don't believe this has occurred. These are examples of where the DEI initiative seems to be well underway before you've even agreed on what you want to do. I would respectfully ask that you order the cessation of all DEI classroom activities and addition of courses, both in our schools and in PD, until the guiding documents and three-year plan are approved.
Thank you, Sugi. I appreciate, you writing and the information. I will look into this. I don't feel, I need to say that there's no lack of oversight. I feel like we're very, very involved in what happens at the school sites, but, always can do better. But one of the things I wanted to say is I don't believe there have been any new courses added at the high school that would require board adoption. We have expanded the potential offerings from PCC. One I know is a sociology course, and those are courses that the PCC offers to us. They are on our campus. They are provided by a PCC instructor, and typically the board doesn't adopt those. And part of it is they get included in the registration materials. And again, students vote with their feet. If we don't have enough students sign up for the offering, it doesn't fly. But the only additional offerings that I can think of that relate to what you're describing here are not LCUSD offered courses, but courses that have been selected to be offered on our campus via PCC.
Indeed, thank you. And I just have to ask if someone could make a motion. We are at 10:19, actually 10:20, for an extension of the meeting, because I think we're going to go past the 10:30 mark.
I would be happy to make the motion to extend our meeting past 10:30, going as late as possibly 12 o'clock.
All right, thank you, Dan. Do I have a second? Yes.
Seconded.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, we have a second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? I see everyone's hands, including mine. Thank you. We'll keep going.
All right, just a handful of more.
Sorry, Jamie. I was just
That's okay.
hopefully not until midnight, but if need be, we'll keep going.
Our next comment comes from an anonymous LCUSD parent, and this parent writes, "Your commitment to the DEI effort is second to none. That includes the amount of effort to reopen schools fully and develop a plan to recover from the education impact of the COVID response." Thank you. Our next one comes from an anonymous community member. "On the last page of the document, there was mention of Pride Month. Could you please elaborate on that?"
My understanding, and I'd have to find that specifically, but that there is an interest in the identifying the contributions on the months that are identified. Like we have African American History Month, we have Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, we have Autism Awareness Month. There is an interest in underscoring and identifying the contributions and the many distinct areas of advancement provided by the LGBTQ plus community to not only the local situation, the national, California, and so highlighting those for students, it's part of just celebrating the differences that that all people bring to the table and all the contributions that a variety of individuals make, and how they identify is part of understanding those contributions.
Thank you.
You want me to read one?
Please.
This one is from Ethan Engold. As an alumnus of LCUSD schools, graduating class of 2015, I'm impressed and in full support of the DEI plan as presented. An initiative like this would have greatly enriched my experience and feeling of belonging in LCUSD schools if it had been implemented when I was a student. I'm glad that LCUSD students get to benefit from this now. I encourage the governing board to adopt the plan and to continue to be involved in the work of actualizing the initiatives with vigor and timeliness.
I'll read the next one. Keisha Wilcox, LCUSD parent. Thank you all for moving forward on the DEI initiatives. I'm so grateful for all of your hard work and am proud to be a part of a district that works to create an environment where all of our kids can feel included and welcomed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Side note, the board member's name is pronounced Caroline, not Carolyn.
And I think, Keisha, that was my fault. I know Caroline's name. I know how to pronounce it, but I think I talked too much tonight. And at one point I did call her Carolyn. So I apologize to both our board member and to you.
The next comment comes from Nicole Abraham, LCUSD parent. The subject of DEI, while seemingly well-intentioned, has clearly been an incredibly divisive issue in our community. I think many parents are concerned about the implementation of policies that open doors to many gray areas. It has never been the role of the state public school system to impose upon the students their version of morality, ethics, and virtue. That is the job of the home and should remain so. Over half the public comments have been read by parents of existing LCUSD students, express significant concern and opposition to the implementation of this DEI program in our schools. We are expressing our dissent, but it is falling on deaf ears. How is it that what is seemingly the majority of parents whose property taxes are funding LCUSD schools have no say in the matter? Why is it left to the sole discretion of school board that does not appear to be representing their constituents? And our last couple, LCUSD parent writes, much like Wendy's response about demographics, in DEI race is now placed first. NIT, I think that must have meant not the student. And lastly, Noelle Burnett, LCUSD parent. I continue to oppose this extremely divisive issue. No matter how many times the board continues to try and change the definition of words, the intent and meaning is the same. Clearly, the majority of parents are opposed to this agenda in school, and yet you are still trying to ram this down our throats. Thank you for your comment.
For the feedback and the information and for the reading. All right, going back to our board, can we continue the discussion and the dialogue? Any other comments and clarification needed? Anyone want to add anything else? Okay, so we have a motion to discuss, and this is a first read item, but it has an asterisk. Are we still at that level right now? Do we come back to it, or are we moving to adopt? And if so, then I would need a friendly amendment to a motion. Josh.
I'd like to make an amendment to the motion to the motion to say that we adopt the diversity, equity, and inclusion 3-year implementation plan.
Joe, I think you made the initial motion. Do you accept the friendly amendment?
I thought my motion was to discuss, so I think it's appropriate that he has the actual motion to approve, right? To adopt.
Well, yeah, it's a
But I
friendly.
accept either way. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a second to the amendment? Anyone want to second?
I'll second.
Okay, Caroline, thank you so much. We have a motion. We have an amendment to the motion. We have a second to both. And any other discussion or comments? Dan.
I would ask if we're not approving it tonight, what direction are we giving staff to change to bring back? I haven't really heard much in terms of direction, so I don't know what we would be putting it over to a future meeting. Is there something that we've directed staff that we would like to see done before voting on it?
Anybody want to add to that? Is there any direction that hasn't been articulated, hasn't gone over? And I know we've had several discussion time given to the 3-year plan. And it's been discussed at every subcommittee. It's been presented. I think the first time we saw it was at our retreat initially. It's gone over. We've taken things out, added things, clarified definitions, more clarity provided. So I don't see any other direction except my main point would be to always be transparent and to continue the transparency with the community. And I don't think that that's going to be an issue.
And I think in line of what I was talking about earlier, I would like to see more details about how the district is going to implement some of these things. I think that's critical, but that's a topic for another time, because before the district does implement any of these things, there'll be more discussions about the way we're implementing. So I think that's something we can bring up at a later point.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Josh?
I feel that my direction would be the same whether we were to pass the amendment tonight or not, which would be to continue to work towards formulating the oversight, how we're going to find the oversight committee, because I think getting that in place for the beginning of the school year is going to be important, whether we pass it to this time or whether we end up the motion doesn't pass. We're still got to work towards that. So I think if we were going to look for direction, that would be the direction as one of the more important next steps.
Caroline.
Question.
Yes.
As a newbie, it says first reading item. We can approve a first reading item?
We can if there's an asterisk. It's a potential. Since this has come up on several occasions, community members have seen it, we've vetted it, subcommittee members have worked on it. So it's been around for quite a while. So we do have the option if we choose. We do have a motion. There's been a friendly amendment to the motion. We've had a second to that. So we could potentially adopt it if we choose to move forward.
I think that was a big benefit of the retreat as well, was for all of us to really auger down into the details, ask some questions. And then from those, some of that interrogation of the content came some changes and some build outs. And so, yeah, this isn't, I don't think this is not, the content's not foreign to any of us at this point.
I guess I would ask Wendy, if we kicked it over to the next meeting, are there any changes you would suggest making at this point, or you think we're pretty much there?
This plan model follows, how we have developed plans in the past. Comes to mind the Common Core implementation plan, the Next Generation Science Standards implementation plan. It's very similar to the level of specificity that you find in the local control and accountability plan. So, I think that there are, objectives or goals that are identified, and then there are some ideas on how to achieve those. And then once the board were to adopt it, you drill down and you find specifics, and those come to the board in the form of reports or in the form of agenda items. And so there really isn't much that I would say we would do between now and June 8th, because this is the type of plan that typically the board approves. And then, what happens is that the work begins and the details, get fleshed out. I mean, I do take Josh's and the other board members' direction about needing to define the oversight committee. How big will the committee be? How, vetting the application, who is going to decide, who's going to review, how are you going to ensure what we've committed to in terms of balance? So that would be a next step, but that would be part of the plan that gets fleshed out as you move forward once you have an adopted plan. So, I don't really feel like, I would continue to work on it, but it would be, to the criticism that we're not paying enough attention to reopening and COVID, I would disagree, but I wouldn't be spinning my wheels crazily if there wasn't a plan adopted to then, flesh out these details.
And actually, I'm thinking there's a lot more detail in this plan as we're
Than some we've seen.
format.
Mhm.
Okay, Dan, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Any other comment? Josh, Caroline, Joe? Okay, so then am I sensing a call to the question? We have a motion to adopt. We have a second. So can I ask all in favor of adopting the 3-year, the DEI 3-year implementation plan? All in favor? I see Josh, Joe, Caroline, Dan, myself, and we are set to go. Thank you, everyone. And again, I say that we have we have adopted, but this is just the beginning of the work. So we will continue to move forward. Much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the bond audit. Mark, I'm thinking that's your department.
That is my department. Thank you. Each year, in addition to our regular audit, there's an audit on Measure LCF that's done by the same company. Eide Bailly produces this audit for us. There are two major components of the audit. One is checking to see that we have our good financial practices and there were no concerns found there. And the other is to see that we're conforming to the bond language. And both of those requirements were met. It's a $5,000 contract that happens annually. We're bringing it to you for approval. The only note was that the national level of the audit firm asks that they report our cash and county treasury at the fair market value, whereas we reported at the net asset value, and that's what that $138,000 difference was. It's not considered material, and it's more of an accounting mechanism. But when we take the money out of the county treasury to make payments, we get dollar for dollar back in addition to our interest. So that's just, that was something that I had to double check on because it looked like a discrepancy. They explained it as just a different way of reporting it from one level to another. So just
Thank
wanted to clarify that. So it's asked that the board receive and accept the audit report for Measure LCF 1920.
Again, this is a first read item, but there is an asterisk, we can receive and accept, but let me have a motion to begin the discussion and potentially accept with a vote. So maybe we can combine the two, potentially accept. Dan,
I would move to accept the report.
okay. And do I have a second? Joe, any comments, discussions, questions? You've already clarified the discrepancy, Mark, so thank you for that. All in favor? I see everyone's hand, myself, Josh, Dan, Joe, and Caroline. Thank you. Moving on to item number C. This is a license agreement for classrooms at Foothill Intermediate School. Mark, for you again?
Yeah, we had one vacancy due to COVID. The Learning Ladder is no longer a tenant with us, and that space was available. It's actually the space kind of right above Anais's office. And there's right next to that is another classroom that has not been used. So we put out an RFP for interested parties to lease either one or both of the spaces. We had two submissions, and we ended up going with the one from La Cañada Prep, who's a current tenant. They will take on that area. They wanted all of the area. It's a total of 2,373 square feet, if I remember correctly. And they will be paying at the rate of $2.34 per square foot. We paralleled much of the license agreement off of their current agreement, so there would be no confusion, but this is a 4-year license agreement that goes through June 30th, 2025 for those spaces.
Thank you, Mark. And your recommendation is that we accept and approve the license agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept and approve? Joe?
Motion to accept and approve
Thank
the
you.
license agreement.
And Caroline is second. Questions? Comments?
I guess the only comment would be, could we ask them to make lots of noise jumping up and down to bother Anais as much as possible?
Oh, nice. Great suggestion there, Dan. Anais is not going to respond right now. Thank you. If no other comments or questions, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of accepting the license agreement? I see everyone's hand, all board members' hands, Josh, myself, Caroline, Joe, and Dan. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to item number 12D is the contract renewal for food service management companies. Mark, again?
Yes.
Hey, can I interrupt for 1 second? I'm sorry. I just want to report out that there weren't any comments on the bond item when it was voted upon, but one came in right after. So that'll just be made available to the board. So you guys can see that comment that came in after, and there were no comments on the last item.
I appreciate it, Jamie. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and, so contract renewal for food service management company, Mark.
Yes, and I will leave it up to you, Madam President, to decide. The cover sheet was actually last year's when I submitted it for the board agenda packet. I put that as a placeholder, and then I proved to be the weakest link in getting the new one from my office over to Nairi. So I apologize for that. We can table it and do it in June 8th if you would prefer. There's no deadline to get it done tonight, or I can explain to you what the changes are for this year. So I'll let the board decide what you are more comfortable with.
I think, you said there's no deadline.
No, we need to do it before June 30th, so we can postpone it, and I'll bring it back to you with the correct cover sheet on June 8th if you'd prefer.
Mark, there was nothing substantive in the cover sheet. It was just procedural in nature.
Well, the price was incorrect because it was last year's price. So the biggest change is that the price per meal is now $2.14 versus $2.05. It's our 5-year contract. This is the 2nd year of it. So.
So the price to the families?
No, the price that we pay to our vendor, Chartwells, for providing each meal.
I'm comfortable with this moving forward. How does everyone else feel?
Can we just clarify, Mark, the attachment I'm looking at seems to have the 214 price in it. Are you saying somewhere else it's got the wrong price?
The cover sheet was dated from last year. It got carried forward. The contract is correct.
Okay, so what we've been reviewing, the contract itself is the correct one. So
Yes.
it's just the cover sheet was wrong.
The cover sheet was incorrect. So, so anybody on the public seeing that would have had the incorrect information, but the document and the contract itself is the current contract for the new year.
Okay, Josh, go ahead and, yes, Josh.
So the financial impact is incorrect on the agenda.
On the cover sheet,
But
Right.
what's front facing on the agenda?
right. So I'm perfectly happy bringing it back and updating that cover sheet so it reflects and the contract itself.
As long as it doesn't cause any issues, are we comfortable with moving it? Let me just put it out to the board. Wendy, any concerns with moving it to June 8th? I'm comfortable moving forward now, but I just want to make sure we have clear information out there.
I'm comfortable with moving forward with it tonight. I don't think that there's a material difference. If someone had an interest in the pricing and the contract and looked at the documents, they would have the correct information from the documents. So I think we've given adequate notice to anyone in the public who might have an interest in making comments or discussing this particular issue. So I'm comfortable that we've had a thorough discussion of it.
Okay, so let me just ask, as we're preparing the minutes, Nairi, if we can just make sure we highlight, just to clarify that the cover sheet is incorrect, but the content of the contract is correct. So that would be appreciated.
Sure,
And
no
so-
problem.
Thank you, Nairi. And Dan, is that a motion then?
Yes, I'd move to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Going one? Oh, thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? And Jamie, is there any public comment on this?
Thank you. No public comment.
Thank you. Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving the contract renewal with the $2.14, the information that's in the contract body. All in favor, Josh, myself, Joe, Caroline, and Dan. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we are now at item number 13, which is consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve consent agenda? Josh, thank you for the,
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda.
thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Caroline. I have a motion and a second. Questions? All in favor of approving consent agenda? I see everyone's hand. Thank you. Consent agenda has been approved. We are now at communication. So let me begin with Josh. Anything you'd like to communicate?
Yes, sorry, I have it here. First of all, I just wanted to say I have an 8th grader, and the 8th grade events went over gangbusters, and you know, the joy in her face when she came home from that was great. And I've heard the same about prom, and so congratulations to everybody for that. And since this is our last meeting of the school year, just congratulations to our soon-to-be graduates. But I also wanted to say to every student, whether you got an explicit night to celebrate your achievements or not, I just want to call out and say how impressed I've been at your perseverance and hard work in what's been an incredibly challenging year. The way that you've handled yourself this year makes us proud as parents and school board members and as a community. So thank you to all of our students. Whether you got to celebrate in a very public way or not, you are celebrated. And so thank you for everything.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Caroline.
I actually was at the 8th grade party fair on Friday, and I worked both shifts. And just to see all those kids, it was wonderful. Everyone had a great time and everyone was happy. I wanted to thank our PTA and our PTSAs for a really fantastic teacher appreciation and staff appreciation week. They went above and beyond. It was at the middle school and high school, there was food every day, it seemed like. I really appreciate all the work that they put in for us.
Thank you, Caroline. Joe.
Just looking forward to seeing all the faces in person for graduation at the Rose Bowl. It's going to be a real special opportunity for everybody. And that's, again, I think I mentioned last meeting, one of the true joys of everything we do as board members is it's what it's all about for all of us, right? Is to see these kids get their diplomas. So I'm super excited about that. And thanks again to all the staff and everybody in Caroline, everybody else that's worked so hard to give some great experiences for our kids. I know there's movie nights coming up this week, 7th, 8th grade, a whole bunch of stuff my family's looking forward to. Thanks to everybody's efforts making these last few weeks as special as possible.
Dan?
I just want to extend a special thank you to Toby Lusader and to the illustrious Jamie Lusader, who accompanies him on many of the journeys, for all the photography that Toby's done of all of our sports teams. I don't know if you haven't had a chance to look at it, you should take a look at the link. The photography is unbelievably good. It looks like stuff that would be on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It is, you know, close-ups and action shots and great images that are just so wonderful and so, not only from a like technical standpoint, but from composition and capturing the moment for the athletes. Jamie and Toby drove out to Santa Monica to see one of the lacrosse games. They fought the traffic going all the way out there because, you know, of course, Santa Monica traffic is always horrible. But their effort to get out there on a weekend, on Mother's Day weekend, was very much appreciated by all the parents. And all the pictures that Toby has had and published from all of our sports teams are just unbelievably good pictures. And a reminder of how far we've come this year, that we started out with hoping we could get some of our sports teams to participate in some activities and training. And we reached all the way to the end where we had competitions and, you know, the Rio Hondo Swim Championships tomorrow, and just incredibly hard work by all of our athletic directors and our coaches and our staffs and our administrators and our teams to get to that point. And that Toby documenting it was just greatly appreciated. Thank you, Toby and Jamie.
Thank you so much, Dan. Let me go to cabinet, and I'll save myself and you, Wendy, last. How's that?
I'll go.
Okay, Anais.
I wanted to take a minute and thank and acknowledge all of our classified employees, since this is their week to be celebrated and appreciated, starting from site secretaries to our custodians, to our maintenance crew, librarian, paraprofessionals, everyone. We have the most stellar classified employees teams that I have ever interacted with, and we're very grateful for the hard work they put in and want to appreciate them this week and every week.
Thank you.
That's it.
You did, yes, absolutely. And food service too, especially since the contract was on there, our food service team. Thank you.
Well, and I thank you, Anais, for including that. I was going to go there as well. And they did so much to help us meet our protocols and keep operating this year. But I wanted to jump and piggyback on athletics that Dan was talking about, and just give a shout out to Carrie Sachs, Jason Ito, Chris Henry, Dolly Liedelmeyer, Karen Hurley, all helping us get the testing taken care of so that we can get into our competitions and all. And they just were on top of it all the time. So thank you to all of them for kind of staying on top of that task.
Thank you, Mark. Jamie, anything you'd like to add?
Just a few. So on the topic of athletics, was it last night? Last night, Lauren Scoville scored her 1,000th point at the Flint Ridge Prep game. It was pretty spectacular to see that. And we were able to capture some of that. So video coming soon, as well as some photography for that. That was a really big moment. It was quite spectacular to see that. And then just on prom, just a shout out to the teachers and staff that volunteered. I know I shouldn't be surprised, but everybody is so tired. And I was actually surprised at how many teachers were there in support. I mean, I went to be a photographer's assistant and I was tired, but just the joy on the kids' faces and the staff seeing them interact with the kids was worth it. It was maybe my first and last prom. I was very excited that was the one that I got to go to. And it was really, really good. I mean, seeing it on campus, and the campus was beautiful, but again, shout out to the teachers for being there and supporting the kids, and all the staff. I mean, they were manning the carnival booths and helping with the food. Everything was amazing. So that was great. And then my final one is just a reminder to families and staff and students, we will be having our kind of annual end of the year survey. Typically we give these out kind of mid-year, but because we've done other surveys, we saved this one for the end. We've cut down questions as much as possible. So it should be super short, about 7 to 10 questions. And so families will should have gotten an email today letting them know when their students will be taking it and options for that. And then staff will be taking that soon. And again, they're just critical questions we need just to be able to finish our year-end reports and see how we did this year. So your feedback is super important. So that's coming soon for students, family, and staff.
Thank you, Jamie. I'll keep myself last, but I've got Nairi if she has anything, and then we'll go to Wendy.
Nairi, do you have
I,
anything for us?
sorry, I had to unmute myself. No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Nairi.
Nairi.
Wendy.
I just have three things. One is to just echo the comments of thanks to everybody who's doing such stellar work, but particularly our classified staff, as this is their special week, and we appreciate all they do when they come to us with a variety of expertise. And, no matter where they are, whether it's in the business office, the technology office, the maintenance and operations, workers, food services, classroom support, office support, they are just really incredible. So thank you to them. I have two kind of action items. One is that we do need a special. We have to do two things. We have to have the board approve the expanded learning opportunity grant. And we could have that, it's due by end of, 24 hours on the 1st, or maybe has to be filed by the morning of the 2nd. So we can go in as late as into the 1st, but we need to have that off to the powers that be. And then also in that meeting, we will be closing the loop on the last survey, the Panorama Ed survey. And I think that's important to do. I know people have survey fatigue. But if you take all these surveys and you never get any results, the survey fatigue even seems more frustrating. So we would do the Panorama Ed survey results, and then we would approve the Expanding Learning Opportunity Grant, both so that we can finish up on details for the end of the school year. So it could be in the day, if that's better for board members. It can be in the evening. A lot of evening events are coming up. So I looked at my calendar, and really the only one that I'm free on is the 1st, and I asked Mark, and Mark, you did check that that's not too late.
I checked, we have to approve it by the 1st, and then we have to submit it to the county within a few days. So we could meet on the 1st.
Do we have a rehearsal? Don't we have an 8th grade rehearsal on the 1st?
We don't have to go to rehearsal.
Okay.
So let's take a look at some options for dates.
Well, the 1st we have agenda planning, so it sounds like at least 2 of us will be there.
I'll be there. I'm at every agenda planning this year.
Yeah, I think it's you and with me, Kai, too.
Yeah.
Are we talking about doing this in person or Zoom?
I think we're still in a Zoom mode. If
Yeah, I mean, I think, I heard the concern and the criticism tonight, but I think in order to act out our intentional plan, it would be bringing the agenda item on the 8th, and then having the board at that meeting determine when our first in-person meeting would be.
I think that's a
Tuesday's
good idea,
fine.
because I think we want to also incorporate some of the things we have been doing remotely. Some of the streaming of the meeting, some of the other things that we've worked out. I think we'll probably want to incorporate when we go back in person. So it does seem like it needs a full agenda item to discuss it and come up with the best plans.
so, is the 1st okay? Do we go to the
1st
3rd
is fine.
1st works for me.
line? It's okay. And as long as it meets the demands of the regulations, I guess the 1st it is. What time are we talking? 5
Can I
o'clock?
do it right after agenda planning?
Earlier the better would be great.
We could schedule it for, agenda planning's been going for a little while because there's so much to talk about. We could do it right at 10:30.
Does that work
Like it.
okay for everyone? Joe,
Yep, that works for me.
Caroline, Dan, we're good?
Works for me.
Tuesday the 1st, I think I'm okay.
And then the second item, thank you, everybody. I know that calendars are tight right now. The second item that I wanted to ask about is we got notification. It was probably Kim's least favorite thing, so we'll have to indoctrinate Nairi to this practice. But we got notice today that the annual educational convention for California School Board Association, they're offering an in-person and a online version. We've always, up until last year, gone as a group for the in-person. It is in San Diego, and it is December 2nd through 4th. And the registration is opening up soon. I didn't know if we wanted to, we didn't have much, I mean, I know we had 2 new board members that participated to some extent on the virtual offering, but it's far more, I think, meaningful to go in person. And so I didn't know if people, I know it's a big projection on the calendar, but do we want to secure spaces for, the 6 of us to attend on the 2nd through 4th in registration?
I'm sorry, you said it was December, right?
Right.
I'm in favor of it. I mean, I think it's a great experience, especially if you're a newbie, Caroline and Josh. So I think by then, everything will be a really good spot. San
I'm
Diego
in
is a
favor of
good
it.
place to do it.
I think traditionally we have not gone through the 4th. I don't know if we can do a shorter registration, but I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, we'll look at the options. We typically go on the Thursday and the Friday.
It sounds like we're all interested.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, so from my end, I just wanted to say congratulations to all our students that are graduating and promoting from transitional kindergarten, elementary school, 8th graders, and then on to college. I think this is the most exciting. What a wonderful time. Congratulations to the students and the families. I also wanted to pass on my thanks as well to Jim and his team and the PTSA at the high school for the successful prom and activities coming up, and also Dr. Gold and his team and the PTA at the 7-8. I know that the elementary schools also have many activities happening, so really wonderful effort. And the comment about the teachers, absolutely, I find everyone is tired, but we're all engaged to try and make sure our students have the best experience possible. I also would like to say that the banners on Foothill Boulevard look amazing. So wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for continuing that. I keep driving back and forth on Foothill all the way down and then all the way west and then all the way east just to be able to see both sides, and I keep checking. So if I'm driving slowly and someone's behind me, I'm not even going to tell you what I'm driving these days, so you can't honk. All right. So, but I'm looking at the banners. And then honestly, on behalf of the board, just to the community and to everyone, I cannot tell you what a tumultuous year it's been. We've all experienced it, but I have to just put out my thanks for everyone's perseverance, this roller coaster that we've been on, and I cannot wait to see everyone back to school in August, face-to-face, first day. I will look forward to it. Everyone's effort and commitment to the district and to the students has been amazing. So thank you. And if there's nothing else, I just would like to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We're all set. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see many of you at special meetings, but everyone else at graduation. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.